I mean, he called them the
Like,
X-Men, right? After himself.
yeah,
He's clearly a narcissist. I don't know what to
that's
tell
very
you.
true. Everyone wants to call them my X-Men, though. Come to me, my X-Men.
Welcome back to Nerd Legion. DoA, we just finished reviewing Shogun.
We did.
And what information did we just receive? That they are planning to make a season 2 and 3 of Shogun after we applauded them for just leaving it alone, leaving the story where the book ends, and now they're just going to make up a bunch of shit that isn't in the book, and it's going to be terrible.
Well, that's never gone poorly before, so I'm sure, you know, when people go beyond where the books are in a dramatic, political intrigue-centric show, and just start inventing their own stuff, that never goes wrong. So I have complete confidence. But, you know, I haven't seen this myself yet. You've told me this, and I believe you, but I haven't seen it myself yet, so I'm just going to pretend that it's not true for as long as possible. So wish me luck.
That's all right. Shogun had the perfect ending, and then they decided to ruin it because it was suffering from success, right? Yeah,
we can just not watch it.
I won't.
I won't. We can just not. I mean, I don't know if people will allow that. I don't know if others will allow us to just not watch it. But, you know, there is a world where we just don't watch it. Are there enough Star Wars shows coming out? Who knows?
You don't want to see the continuing adventures of John Blackthorne and his pal Tornaga.
Will he ever get his boat back? I don't know. I want him to get his boat back, you know? Even if he doesn't want to take it anywhere. We need just a pirate John Blackthorne, the pirate who's not a pirate series, you know?
So this week, guys, we're going to be talking about X-Men 97, which just finished. Had a lot of critical acclaim, a lot of hype surrounding this show. Actually did surprisingly well in terms of viewership. They're already planning a season 2, even though Beau Demayo has gotten canned from his position as...
Before it even came out.
And we don't really know the reason, just that he was difficult to work with.
I was going to say, yeah, that tells us enough, you know? We've all worked with those kind of people, and there is a point where it doesn't matter what the level of talent is. If they're impossible to work with, then you're out the door. That's just how it is.
Well, he already has apparently written most of season 2, so it's season 3 that is kind of up in the air. So if you guys don't know what this show is, it is on Disney Plus. It is a continuation of the late 90s Fox children's animated show, and because our generational cohort of millennials, DoA, is incredibly insufferable, we can't have new things. We can only have nostalgia baits for millennials until the end of time, because how else, DoA, are you going to be able to appeal to people who are still discussing which Hogwarts house they're in by the time they're in their 40s?
Our generation is like the birds that regurgitate what they ate to feed their young. We are the human equivalent of that from an entertainment perspective. Is there nutrition there? Yes. Is it disgusting and you wish you could do it any other way? Absolutely. I'm nostalgic in that I remember things from my childhood and be like, I had a great childhood. There's a lot of cool stuff back then. I don't have nostalgia in the way that it seems like a lot of other people do, where it's like they just need more of that all the time. I'm like, yeah, that stuff was great, but like, why can't we have new stuff? I've said that so many times on this show. You know, all the effort put into making X-Men 97, and it was a great series. I'd rather have had all that creative effort. I think it was pretty fun, but we'll get into that. But it doesn't matter. I will say this again, because I've said it so many times before. I would rather have all that creative effort put into something new, something memorable, than yet another sequel. You know, yet more regurgitated stuff from our childhood entertainment.
Well, it's also, I mean, you say that this is designed, you know, to regurgitate to our children, but this is far more violent than the original one, and it really is just a continuation for us, really.
We're regurgitating it so we can consume it again.
We're just a millennial human centipede.
Like a cow, you know, don't cows like kind of regurgitate stuff and chew it again?
Yes,
the cud
chew
or whatever.
Cud. Yeah. Yes.
It is the entertainment cud. That's what I think I'm going to call this stuff from now on. It's entertainment cud. We had swallowed it before, but now we're regurgitating it to chew on it and see if we still like the flavor.
Except this time they kill off our favorite characters and make it more violent and edgy.
Yes. They did kill off my favorite character. We'll get to that too, I'm sure. But how did you know? Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
So wait, let me ask first though. Maybe you were going to talk about this. Did you watch the series back in the day? Were you like a big fan of the old X-Men series in the 90s?
So I didn't, because I was too old in the late 90s for this. You know,
really? You feel like you were too old for this?
Yeah, I wasn't really
like
watching. I wasn't really watching superhero cartoons when I was like 12.
Okay.
11, 12, when this came out. I think you were because you had younger siblings, but I didn't. So
yeah, I mean, I was kind of reading some of the comic books and things like that too. But the funny thing is, I didn't really watch very much of this series either when it was first out in the 90s because I'd never had cable at my house and Fox wasn't one of the local channels. So the only time we could ever watch Fox, which included like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and that kind of stuff too, was at my grandma's house 3 hours away. So I missed a lot of that stuff in my childhood because I just simply didn't have access to it. I know this sounds strange in our world of instant streaming. You can watch whatever you want, whenever you want. But there was a time where you were limited to what was on your local channels if you didn't have the ability to get cable. So.
Yeah, and so this started in 92, so I would have been the age for it at the beginning of this show. And probably for most of the show's run, it ended in 97. But
yeah,
I didn't
think you were
watch.
Too old for it.
No, I would have been, at the beginning, especially I would not have been. But I didn't watch it, I think, because I wasn't watching cartoons, like kids' cartoons on Fox. I was watching them on WB because I was watching like Batman Superman Adventures more and Batman Beyond. And the reason why
that too. Yeah.
And the reason why is because my uncle was a writer on those shows. So I was just more like keyed into that because of my family. But I think because I was watching mostly like Saturday morning cartoons on Warner Brothers, I just wasn't that into the X-Men stuff. So, I don't really have nostalgia for this, regardless of the reason. I don't really have nostalgia for this show. So I'm kind of just coming into it and evaluating it on its own merits now.
The way I would describe it for me is similar. I don't have nostalgia for the show, but I always thought the X-Men were cool.
Yeah.
I always liked the idea of the X-Men, even though I didn't really get to engage with it very much as a child, besides a few comic books I bought here and there, playing the X-Men arcade game, I guess. So I knew like the
shout out to that in this series, by the way. That was crazy, I know, right? Nostalgia bait. That got me.
That was like it was neat for like 10 seconds, and I was like, whatever. I'm tired of the sound effects. But I was more of a fan of the concept and like the powers and stuff like that. Like I drew a lot of these like when I was a kid, all I did was draw. I would play video games and I would draw video game characters. I would copy things on Nintendo Power. I would copy things I saw off TV out of comic books and stuff. So I drew a lot of X-Men. Gambit especially, who I just thought was the coolest character ever. Rip in peace Gambit, spoiler alert. But I just thought his abilities were really neat. But that was my relationship with X-Men, is I knew the characters, I knew their names and their powers. And that was really about it. I didn't know a lot of the plot lines around it. So I'm kind of coming into this semi-fresh too. I've seen, I watched the movies in the late 90s, early 2000s, which they do poke fun at in the series, which I did enjoy. There's one point Cyclops is like, "What did you expect? Black leather?"
Oh hey, almost forgot.
Am I going to war or a circus?
What'd you expect? Black leather?
Their costumes, and that's what they all wore in the old X-Men movies. So yeah, that was a nice little poke at the live action X-Men. I like that.
And like, look, we all like, if you were a millennial, you also grew up with those X-Men movies. Fox owned the rights to X-Men, so they were making those, and that's why they were kind of separated from the rest of the Marvel world later. And that we've had some kind of fragmenting of the Marvel universe because some people owned rights to things like Spider-Man or X-Men prior to Marvel making their own films, right?
Madam Web. Someone had to own the rights to that.
Somebody, I haven't seen that yet. That's probably something we should review, by the way, for hilarity's sake. I think we should
probably on stream by now.
Leave us some comments if you want us to talk about Madam Web. I will watch that for the lulz.
If there's a slow week, we can definitely do it. Yeah.
So DoA, now I have some really interesting takes on X-Men films, such as I think the best superhero film ever made is X-Men Days of Future Past, which is like an ultra hot take because I include obviously the Christopher Nolan Batman movies and stuff in there. I think it's great. And X-Men First Class is also really good. And I think both of those two films were incredibly well made, and then we went straight into X-Men Apocalypse, which is just god awful.
Yeah,
it sounded so
that
good,
was not a
Oscar
good
Isaac
one.
as Apocalypse, and then oh my
Yeah.
lord, it is terrible. But you know,
Yeah.
there we got a couple really, I think, truly excellent X-Men films in there, and so
Yeah, First Class
I think
was really good. Yeah.
First Class and Days of Future Past is awesome because I think it really does a really terrific job of presenting the different viewpoints of the X-Men, like the three sides of it. So you get you kind of get Mystique's side of it as well, in addition to like Magneto and Xavier's. So I think it shows a really multi-dimensional approach to the issues of mutants, and that's what's compelling about X-Men at the end of the day. The reason why these shows are cool is because Magneto isn't just a villain; he's an anti-hero, right? And you understand his agenda, and you understand why he thinks the way he does, and you understand that, you know, he sometimes is helpful, and even in this series he's sometimes very helpful, and then sometimes, you know, he flies off the chain. But at the same time, like, is he wrong about a lot of the stuff and the treatment of mutants? No, he's like actually right. It's just that he doesn't have the patience or the empathy to kind of see the other side, and he is trying to righteously defend his own kind, right, and save himself.
What has he done to me?
Magneto, this was not what we wanted.
Lies. This is your dream. My kind splayed before you, powerless and afraid.
He has good motives, but his methodology is questionable, we'll say.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think that really comes across in this show. We get a lot of the cool characters. It is more similar to the comics that I've read, right, in terms of the language that is used. You know, it's lifted. It feels like dialogue lifted out of the comics. I don't know if I like that. I think it's kind of silly at times and basic. But
I thought it worked very well in the context of this. This is essentially supposed to feel like a series that was made in 1997, and it really does. Like, the dialogue definitely feels that way. The pacing definitely feels that way. You know, so I think if you keep that in mind throughout all of it, I'm okay with that kind of stuff. But it feels strange because we're so used to the way dialogue. Yeah, but everything was much more cheesy back then. So that is true to the way it was.
I know, but I don't want it that way. Like, you
sure,
know what
but
you know what I mean? Like, I don't.
They called it X-Men '97. I don't know what you expected.
I know. I know.
There's a knot in the first 5 minutes of the first episode. Like, that kind of sets the tone, doesn't it?
Take his visor before he starts up again.
No, don't! I surrender!
Not.
Yeah, and you know, unfortunately, like, I feel like, again, that this is a nostalgia piece. I would have rather have seen these storylines kind of be told in a more modern way. But I guess that's not what people wanted. I'm probably not the target audience for this. So, and it also, I mean, it does have. I enjoyed the kind of overarching plot with Bastion and the Sentinels and the techno virus and everything like that. But holy moly, DoA, is there a lot of just garbage thrown in here? Like, that entire Jubilee Mojo video game episode should be fired into the sun.
We're totally in a video game.
We're what?
Pay attention to the young lady. You're like totally in a video game. Love the totally. Just what I was hoping for. Classic Jubilee.
Like, it is so bad, and it's so unnecessary. It doesn't do anything to advance the plot. The only thing it does was bring me a brief spark of joy when they show that old X-Men arcade machine. I'm like, I love that game. We all did, right?
Yeah.
It was the most fun arcade game.
All those 4-player beat 'em ups.
Oh,
like
yeah,
the
the Ninja
Simpsons
Turtle
one
ones
was a ton of fun. Yeah, that one too. I mean, there were a lot of the what is it, Knights of the Round. The King Arthur one was great. But like, so those are great.
Legends.
Yeah, so Gauntlet Legends was a little bit later, wasn't it? But
yeah, it was a little bit later, but still, same concept.
Either way, it applies for sure. That when you mention it being like a comic book and being paced like a comic book, that type of thing. If you read a lot of comic books, you know, sometimes they'll take like half an issue to do like a side for fun thing with some of the characters.
I just hate
and like
it.
So yeah, I know why they did it too, but I'm in the same boat where I'm just like, I know why you're doing this. I don't like it. I am not entertained by this, but they're sticking to their theme to a fault to a certain extent. But that was like, I feel like that was a small enough part of the series overall that it's kind of a minor complaint for me. I distinctly did not enjoy it, but it didn't ruin the entire experience for me, I guess. So I'll give it a bit of a pass.
Because I just feel like it wasn't even really very good comic relief. And
it
also,
wasn't
did
good.
we really need a break from the whole Genosha Sentinel storyline? I think it's just much more powerful if we explore that more, because what ends up happening is, as a result of taking these detours, we actually just it kind of crams in a lot of the rest of the storylines. And one thing that I really don't like about comic book storytelling, especially in superhero comics, DoA, is that it takes a lot of stuff for granted. Like, it's just like, oh, Cable's traveling forward and backward in time, and we're just supposed to accept that and like remember.
We know that's what Cable does. So we're not surprised, And I knew enough about X-Men to know that's what he did.
Sure.
But yeah, I did have the thought when I was watching it that, like, if someone is coming into it truly fresh, or they're not familiar with the powers and the kind of generic backstory of the characters, it would be very confusing.
Yeah,
sure.
and especially because it requires a lot of knowledge to go into this, because, for example, the whole Jean Grey storyline and the references to Dark Phoenix, if you don't know about that, it doesn't make any sense. And then the end also, where she has the Phoenix powers, you don't really have any context for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I will give that stuff a pass because this is meant to be a true sequel to that series. So it's that is their plan, and they're sticking to it. Where they're not going to hold your hand and reintroduce things and waste dialogue that way. They're going to waste it with side stories, I guess. But like, again,
they're going to waste my time with the worst character, Jubilee, and some weird alien that I don't understand how she even got into a video game controlled by this alien.
I'm still not even exactly sure like what Jubilee's powers do other than distract people. Like they're kind of like, they're kind of like very weak versions of other characters that can make things explode, I guess. I don't know. I always, even when I was a kid, I remember Jubilee being like, well, all right. I mean, her powers aren't very good, I guess. She's just sort of like a X-Men sidekick. But I know there's so many people that are huge fans of Jubilee.
Wait,
so we're going to make a lot of people mad by saying that. Oh yeah, for sure. She's got a massive fan base, right? But like, I think
just annoying with lame powers.
She's for fun, and she's quirky, and she's sarcastic, and like, well, as if whatever teen, So, and I make fireworks. Isn't that cool? That's pretty radical. Tubular, right? Cowabunga, dude. But I don't. I've never been a fan of that. Like I said, even when I was a kid, I was like, oh, those powers are kind of lame compared to the other powers. But we got a lot of screen time in this one, so hey, congrats. Congrats, Jubilee. I'm sure the Jubilee fans out there are thrilled by that.
And there isn't anything I could have cared less about than her teenage romance. So, I mean, we got a ton of that as well.
But see, the people who are watching this are teenagers. They haven't aged since the 90s. So that's their kind of thing, I guess, But yeah. This thing was, I guess, like, getting into some of the plots for this. You had the Jean Grey clone and all that, and I was like, this is just peak 90s comic book melodrama, where it's like,
by the way,
it was, and I'm here.
Can I put this aside?
Yeah.
What is wrong with Cyclops where he just didn't have a three-way with the two Jean Greys? You obviously would try that, right? They both love you.
No comment. They don't love each other.
That was my first thought, was that when the two Jean Greys were together, I'm like, Cyclops, Scott, buddy, you gotta have a three-way with your two wives. Why are you not doing this?
I don't know. We're getting into some weird areas with that.
He doesn't even.
That's
try,
where like we
Noah.
get the crossover with the Book of Mormon, I guess. But like it was peak 90s comic melodrama schlock where it's like he has a child with this Jean Grey, but then the other Jean Grey shows up and she happens to be the real Jean Grey. So now, oh, my feelings. Who do I have more feelings for? It's all very, sophomoric and high schoolish. But again,
also about Jean Grey.
Theme,
holy moly, because when she turned into what has to be the worst named character of all time, the Goblin Queen.
I am beyond Jean Grey, beyond the X-Men. I am scorn and fury, forged in righteous brimstone. I am the Goblin Queen.
Goblin Queen? I was like, that kind of comes out of nowhere. I guess it's in the comics.
What does that even mean? But I respect the fuck out of clone Jean Grey because she just has a baby. She just had a baby, and she's like up there flying around, and she's like, you know what I got to do right now? Get into this skin tight leather outfit with huge cleavage. I'm like, wow, you look great for just having a kid. Clone Jean Grey.
That's a lot to go through, But maybe the Goblin Queen, maybe there's other mutant powers, fast recovery from things like that. But when she was like, they do their big naming reveal thing for her, and she's like, I'm the Goblin Queen. Like, where did you come up with that? I mean, like that must be in the comic, I guess. But it's like Mr. Sinister doesn't really seem like a Goblin King or anything like that.
Yeah, well, how come Cyclops didn't say, "Am I the Goblin King?" right after that? Would have been a funny line.
I guess. Or just what the, and then it just cuts out. That would be appropriate too in that circumstance from Carl Summers. Chris, is Carl? What's his name? Scott Summers. My brother's name is Carl. I'm confused with X-Men sometimes, apparently. But Goblin Queen. I even have it in my notes. The note is just Goblin Queen. Okay, that's my note. My other note was that their child has a lot of hair for just being born, which is possible. My daughter had a ton of hair, but it's still fairly rare. So hey, props to Nathan for a full head of hair. Next time we see it, it's kind of receding and white. So, hopefully he
and his
enjoyed
parents
it,
are still treating him like he's a kid, even though he's older than they are, which is a very weird circumstance. And they're
Go to room, Nathan. Mom.
I really just wonder because they're trying to offer him sage advice. But I'm just gonna say, if I was time traveling and I came back and my dad was younger than me, I wouldn't be listening to that motherfucker.
It's like he's got more life experience than his dad does. And that's weird, but that's just how it is.
Oh my God, Nathan.
Let's skip the reunion, Dad.
If it sounds like we're moving very fast with all this, it's because the show moves extremely fast.
Too fast. There's too much stuff in this show.
And again, we're sticking with the mission of being like a comic book where there's like subplots emerging every 5 pages, and that kind of thing. But for the show, I agree where I was like, whoa, end of every episode. It's like a new plot and new villains coming in, Goblin Queens appearing. Like, and it did.
And then she calms down and decides she's going to change her name and be different Jean Grey, and it's all resolved.
What was her new name? Like Miranda something or
Madeline?
I don't know. Madeline Albright, I think. What she became? Maybe not. That was somebody else.
Madeline Pryor.
Madeline Pryor, right? Which is again, like, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Did she have this name prepared? Was this like a name?
I'm sure it's explained in the comics, DoA, and now people are just going to get mad. But it does come across as super weird when she's like, I'm the Goblin Queen. And then she fights a bunch of people, and she's like, well, I guess I'm not under their control anymore. Pryor. Goodbye, I'm Madeline Pryor.
My next life will be mine. Take care, Jean. Call me Madeline Pryor. Farewell, Madeline. Farewell, Jean.
And then you just don't know which one is there for the rest of the series because they're both around, I guess, wearing exactly the same clothes now.
Well, one of them wears a ponytail more often. So, which I think was Madeline Pryor, but I'm not sure. Could be. The theme song is very good though. I did like that they kept the theme song. This is one thing I did remember from the 90s.
Oh yeah, the theme is very good.
Plot for saying the theme song. I did at my grandmother's house in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I did record an X-Men episode or two on VHS to bring home with me so I could watch it. And I remember being like, I don't know, like 10 years old, 11 years old, probably maybe like 9, like around that age, and just rewinding the VHS tape and rewatching the theme song over and over again because I thought the animation was super cool. I thought the song was super cool. The characters are really cool. You know, I just watched it over and over again. I don't know. Did that for a while. It was me.
So in terms of other random subplots that are in here, my other favorite one was Xavier's dead at the start of the show, but he's not dead. He's actually just becoming an alien emperor. And then they get the transmission and they're like, oh,
how did they not know that?
He's becoming an alien emperor. And then he comes back.
Because I thought they were very clear about that he died, but then it looked like it looked like they knew that he didn't die earlier because they showed like a scene where his Shiar, what was her name? I don't remember her name, but that lady with the triangle shaped hair, everybody loves triangle hair there. They really like to look like the Goombas from Super Mario, from the neck up. So anyway, she tells him that like there's not a good chance, but the only chance they have of saving is by taking him to their planet, right? And so I guess the X-Men, like, I don't know why everyone would be talking about him being dead if that was the last scene they saw him, because that he very well could have lived. Did they get like a message or something from her? And she's like, oh yeah, he's dead. He's dead. Sorry. Goomba hair out. I don't know if that happened at some point. I didn't watch X-Men 96, so correct me in the comments, you know? I love how well researched we are for these shows, by the way. We really have a lot of background.
I mean, the thing about this, DoA, is that many people who are going to watch this content are going to be in the same boat as us in that many of them are going to be too young to have watched this stuff, DoA.
That's true, too.
And so they hear the hype because there's been all these like great reviews of this show, mostly by people our age who have been nostalgia baited. And I think that some aspects of this show are good.
I did. I will say again, I did enjoy it overall. I thought it was a fun romp through the 90s comic melodrama schlock past where just accept that it's moving really quick and you're not going to get everything. Just it's like a roller coaster. Just strap in and take the ride. You know, that's what the show is.
I liked the last 3 episodes, but otherwise there was just way too much filler and stuff I didn't care about, and just cynically killing characters. Like we basically just killed Gambit for no reason, as far as I could tell.
Right? Yeah. He just died for the sake of drama. They really, speaking of other old animated features, they really Transformer the movie to this. If you remember the old Transformers movie that came out in 1986, they just killed a bunch of characters for the sake of drama and shakeup. The real reason is because they wanted to introduce a new line of toys, and so they decided to kill off some of the characters in the movie so that those characters are dead. So now you must play with new toys, not those old dead toys that you've got lying around. Apparently.
I mean, I just thought it was funny that they decided to kill Gambit, because Gambit is a character who has not appeared really in the X-Men movies, right?
True, yeah.
And so for a lot of people, they really liked him from the comics or from this TV show, the original X-Men TV show. So it's like instead of what would have made in some ways more sense to me, though, is if they wanted the fake drama and emotional impact, if you wanted to have that with people who hadn't seen the original show, you should have killed one of the characters they knew.
Yeah.
Like Gambit wasn't the main character in the X-Men movies. So
no. I mean, he's got one of the coolest powers. He was always my favorite X-Man because he had a bow staff, which I always thought was cool. I was a big Donatello fan as well, and Turtles. And Gambit could like touch things and make them blow up. I just thought that was a neat thing, and he would use them to like throw cards. Like that's such a random thing to decide to do with your powers, but he got like super good at it, and I thought that was awesome. So I just thought Gambit was a really cool character, and the implementation of his power was really neat. His ultra Cajun personality was always abusing to me too, which is you don't usually see a lot of like ultra Cajun personalities in really anything, in any form of media, aside from like there was that like Bayou Boys or something show on like the History Channel or whatever it was, one of those terrible reality shows, right, where they just follow people along and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't understand anything they're saying. They have subtitles. Gambit's like the only other example of the Cajun personality or person like, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
the
yeah,
accent, the mannerisms, you just don't get that a lot in media. Why are people so afraid of having more extreme Cajuns in TV and cinema? That's my question. You know?
DoA's fighting for Cajun representation.
That's right, mon ami. Yeah.
You stopped the bad guys, saved the kid, got home safe. These beignets needed me more than you did, mon ami.
At least with Gambit anyway, but now he's dead, so thanks a lot. I'm not watching X-Men 98.
And they have more Southern representation with Rogue too, who also has very strong Southern accent.
I think I messaged you. That's a little bit different. That's more of a Southern drawl kind of thing. But I remember messaging you when we were both watching this. Take a drink every time cats are referenced by Rogue, because like every metaphor she has or everything is always cats. Like the cat's out of the bag now. Well, isn't that a bag of angry cats? Sugar.
But you were worried if you still felt how much he loved you, you wouldn't be able to go through with your crusade. And yet, here you are, dragged in like a kitty cat's prize.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, the entire like Rogue Gambit romance into him dying is so bad.
I never knew she was like with Magneto for a while. I didn't even know that happened.
I don't know if it did happen before this, DoA, but like basically her like cucking
or
Gambit because
really
and basically she tells him straight up, I like Magneto because I can fuck him and I can't fuck you. So, and he's like, but what if our love was more than skin deep, Rogue?
Your heart may beat for me, but I can't feel it. You light up everything you touch, but never me.
Something's a bit deeper than skin, Cher.
Not this.
So cheesy. I just can't. I can't deal with it. it's such a
Gambit
forced.
Really
it's just such a forced narrative where it's like, the only person she can touch is Magneto because of his electromagnetic field. How convenient, DoA, that the only person she can bang is Magneto.
It doesn't even make sense to me. Like when they said that, I was like, really? I mean, I guess I'm assuming all of this is in the comics, but or is from the comics.
Bad in the comics. Here's the thing, though. I don't care if it's in the comics. It's just bad. Yeah. It's just bad. It was clearly set up as emotional bait, so they could just kill Gambit for no particular reason, because he's the only one apparently who can stop the Master Mold Sentinel in Genosha. Okay.
Yeah, whatever. I felt that was my least favorite part of the series, that they just treated Gambit like trash the entire time and then killed him. How dare they?
Dude, they cucked him and then they killed him.
I know. He was my favorite character in Marvel vs. Capcom. And now he's dead. Thanks a lot, Mickey Mouse.
He's heartbroken, cucked, and dead.
That is the story of Gambit.
The name's Gambit, mon ami. Remember it.
There's the Genosha thing was interesting. I wanted more of that. I'm sad that it got destroyed so fast. I thought it was amusing. They had the one mutant kid that was like transparent, and so you could see his or her or internal organs the entire time. And I was like, all right, like I know you can't see your skin, but that's not like a license to run around like nude. Like put on some pants, transparent person. I felt like that was a bridge too far, where if you can see all the internal organs, you can see all the internal organs, if you know what I mean. And I don't know, just thinking about the logistics of that made me think, put some shorts on, a lot of superheroes wear shorts.
Some like Cyclops even wear gold underwear on the outside of their skin tight blue leotards.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't? That was a very 90s superhero thing to wear your underwear on the outside. I mean, Wolverine is the opposite. He wears blue underwear on the outside of his yellow tights. I do like, speaking of Scott Summers, of Cyclops, I do like the interview where he just gets kind of mad and he's just like, yeah, we are all better than you,
Because I have to stomach your questions and prove that I'm a person.
I lie because the truth is we're nothing like you. Thank God, because it's the only reason you people are still alive.
I was like, oh, that's good. I like when the character kind of like betrays their own convictions in a moment of emotional weakness. I like that kind of thing, too. That did add a little bit of depth to it. It didn't really go anywhere. In fact, my next note was, and now, Ace of Base. Because that's the moment they just decided to play that Ace of Base song, which is very 90s of them. But it was kind of surprising that you had the dramatic Scott Summers interview point and then the Ace of Base song drinks out. Or did I say drinks out? I'm very tired. Happens. Emerges like a cicada that's been sleeping since 1996. The year for that,
truly, this show is the cicada of television. It's been hibernating since the late 90s. Did anybody really want it back?
No, I like the cud still. It's but this can also be the emerging cicada of the past as well. Past entertainment.
And by anybody,
cicadas.
apparently, I meant everybody, because everybody loves this show except for me, I feel like. And
I will say again, I enjoyed watching the show. I didn't think it was great. I don't think it should win any awards really, but like it has a 9.0 on IMDb right now.
Wild.
People loved it, but I do think people were successfully nostalgia baited. But maybe if I'd watched that series, maybe I'd be really into it too. I don't know. That's the curse of viewing things objectively, I suppose. The only thing I can view through a non-objective lens is Star Wars, and even that, I don't have much patience for anymore.
I think one of the more interesting things about this series that was really good was a lot of the fight sequences and the animation and the visuals. I thought
the
were
animation was
really excellently done. They did a really good job of making it feel like a higher budget version of the 90s one, right? And it's just the choreo, like there's no fight choreography, but the way that they storyboarded the fights. One of my favorite things about like Days of Future Past that I mentioned earlier was that the mutants in that movie combine their powers to do really cool stuff in fight sequences. And you get that here as well. Like you see the teamwork and the way that they have been training to use their powers together to effectively fight their opponents. And so every fight feels really fresh as a result and really compelling. So the action is really great in this. So purely, from a visual perspective, I think this show nails it.
I agree, and that's always the thing that people struggle with X-Men properties, is getting them to actually use their powers, because if it's live action, it's always a special effects drag, right? The first X-Men movie ever was notorious for just not having them ever really use their powers. It was also notorious for Storm going, you know what happens to a toad in a lightning storm? And the answer is the same thing as everything else. And you're like, that was your witty one-liner? Okay, or two-liner? But they also didn't use their powers. And this show did a very good job of doing that. There were a lot of really cool animation sequences. So they definitely nailed it in that regard. I agree. I agree completely on that front. I did like the fight scenes a lot.
And they also didn't use their powers because they were too busy trying to do product placement. So, for example, I think you'll remember this with Cyclops' red Oakley sunglasses that they immediately started selling, right? So it was very early or late 90s, early 2000s cool to have him in a black leather skin suit with the red shiny lens Oakleys, like the ruby red reflective Oakley wraparound sunglasses. It didn't age well, guys.
Yeah, but that was what superhero movies were like before the new era of superhero movies. They weren't really taken very seriously, and that was a good example of that. But I liked when I looked up. I have in my notes. It was Princess Lilandra of the Shi'ar. Who compared, she said the X-Men are a black hole of endless drama as one of the reasons why Professor X shouldn't go back. And I was like, you're right, Lilandra, they are. They are a black hole of endless drama that you would expect them to.
Nearly visit, see their faces.
Yet families often mimic black holes. Visit and risk being stuck in its ever-spiraling vacuum of dramas. This is especially true with your students.
Oh, but I forgot my actual point on the powers I was going to say is that speaking of powers, the show did understand the X-Men's powers very well in that they knew they needed to get Storm out of commission ASAP because she would just be so strong as to make everything they face trivial otherwise, because Storm is just like basically infinitely powerful by being able to control the weather and all that. So they did the smart thing, which has been done in the series from time to time, which is you get Storm out of commission, send her on a side quest, take away her powers temporarily. In this case, she had to go and find a magic cactus with Forge, but get her out of there to get her powers out of there.
Definitely
and then
not a
make the
peyote
situation
reference,
more
by the way.
threatening.
Definitely not a peyote reference.
I don't know, but the point was to get Storm's powers out of the equation to make everything else feel more threatening to the other X-Men,
They have to do that with Jean Grey from time to time too.
They kind of did, and in an emotional way. They kind of hamstrung her emotionally by giving her the whole clone situation and all that. But so they knew they needed to put some temporary nerfs on some of the bigger powers to get things to move along. But yeah, but if you know that, you're like, okay, now I know why they're doing that. We talked about the dialogue in the show being very 90s, which made it very glaring when there was like very much not 90s dialogue that popped up from time to time. Like in the whole Shi'ar sequence where like Professor X is like, oh, should I stay? Should I go back to my X-Men? Come to me, my X-Men. I always feel like you're taking a little bit too much ownership over these X-Men, Professor X, but that's a whole different conversation.
To me, my X-Men.
But
I mean, he called them the X-Men, right, after himself. He's clearly a narcissist. Though I don't know what to
that's
tell
very
you.
true. Everyone wants to call them my X-Men, though. Come to me, my X-Men. Assemble my X-Men.
To me, my X-Men.
Anyway, so using the phrases like speaking the quiet part out loud wasn't really a thing from the 90s. That's a very modern age phrase, I feel like. And then one of the other aliens refers to like Earth as a Milky Way ghetto, which I thought was hilarious. But I also was kind of thrown by because I was like, that line seems very out of place. Like some writer thought they were very clever thinking that up, and then had an alien who doesn't really know the term Milky Way because it's an Earth term, and may not know the term ghetto because it's an Earth term as well. So it's kind of strange to hear that. But maybe this person would be familiar with both of those things. I don't know. So that stuff stood out to me as a little bit weird dialogue-wise, when everything else was so rooted in the 90s and very true to that. You'd have like lines like that once in a while, or it'd be like, oh, that kind of takes me out of the 90s-ness of it.
I mean, I also think like this also has the problem of, I think one of my least favorite parts about the X-Men DoA as a intellectual property is that they had, what I liked about the movies, the original movies, is that they were kind of separated from the rest of the Marvel universe, because when you have the rest of the Marvel heroes in with X-Men, like first off, I think it kind of ruins the scope of X-Men, because the X-Men thing is an existential human crisis that I think it's just better not to have a bunch of other random ass superheroes in the middle of. And was super funny in this show because they just do the fan service thing where they like show you Spider-Man and Captain America and Iron Man and just have them doing nothing during this entire crisis, where like Iron Man's just chilling there while this meteor is falling on the eastern coast of the United States of America. And
they're just there to tell you why they can't.
He's just there in the White House control room, just like standing around, and Spider-Man's just like jumping around. But they keep doing that towards the end. They keep just showing shots of like the other heroes there doing fucking nothing.
I like how Rogue throws Captain America's shield like off into the mountains. They should have cut back to him, and he should have just been like, "Really?" or even better, like, "Not again!" Oh man. I thought that was a
So,
fun moment.
I just don't understand. I think it's just better to have them in their own version of Earth because it makes their storyline much more compelling. Whereas like all these other random like fan service moments of these characters is just really weak in this show. And you just wonder why no one is fucking helping. Like,
yeah, I mean, that's the problem is that
where
the
are
entire
the Avengers
scene,
in the asteroid M is about to fall on America? Come on.
you have to, if you have them in there, you have to spend the whole scene with them telling the X-Men why they can't help. It's like, well, then why even do it? Why even have this character show up? Yeah.
But don't worry about it, though. It's because Magneto turned all the lights off that they couldn't help.
Yeah, just use the magnetic pole to just turn everything off. That was kind of interesting. I feel like that would have much bigger implications on the planet. I guess it did. I guess they did say basically like, well, in 12 hours the world's going to end now. Thanks a lot, Magneto. And I don't know what the scope of the world ending would be in that situation. If it's like the environment going haywire or technology is just dead forever. I don't know. But like, it seemed like an extreme move even for Magneto. And it also seemed like kind of non-drama because, of course, they're going to solve things. It's not going to be like X-Men 3 million BC after this. It's going to be X-Men 98. So we know everything's going to be fine. But yeah, it was interesting. Then they started turning all the people into sentinels. And I was like, I like the concept of the idea of upgrading humanity as an alternative to the evolution of the X-Men, where humanity fights back via like technology kind of. I like that concept, but turning everyone into like just robo zombies was kind of silly because like the scale of like loss of life had to be like catastrophic for everyone they were killing there. But they did miss one giant opportunity with that, where with this show being as truly 90s as it was, they absolutely should have done a scene where like a family turns into, the mutant, not the mutants, but into the sentinel zombies, but it's like clearly the cast of Full House or something. It's like clearly one of the 90s sitcom families or something like that, like Family Matters or like Boy Meets World. You take your pick. Yeah, Fresh Prince, where it's like you don't need to say anything, but like if we're all watching this because of the 90s nostalgia, we know exactly who those people are. And like they should have done that. That would have been hilarious. Missed opportunity there, I think. To have a zombie sitcom.
DoA wants more nostalgia bait. He's not satisfied with the current level of nostalgia bait.
With where they were going, they should have thrown something like that in because it just would have been funny, I mean, why stop there? Why not just have, Uncle Joey show up as like Robo Sentinel and be like, mutant, cut it out, If you watch Full House, you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, that was incomprehensible.
I also think, like, what is the end goal of this? Because they're basically just a hive mind with Bastion. So is the purpose? So they're so afraid. Yeah, they're so afraid of people eventually becoming mutants that they're just gonna Borgify themselves now. How does that make sense?
And like, I just have major questions about this whole thing because. If this technology was like secretly lurking inside people, like you'd think someone would have noticed the rocket boosters in their feet at their last physical or something, like it just doesn't make any sense at all. Like this,
you're so close to actually just saying the show is bad, which it is.
Maybe it is just bad. I don't know. I had fun watching it, but not because it was good. That makes sense, right? Yeah, you can have fun watching something and accept that it's not good. So I had fun watching this. I did enjoy it. I don't think it was particularly well crafted, but it was fun. Although I did have the note, zombies are boring in my notes because they are boring.
I also just don't even think that you really needed the infection of human subplot. Like the army of sentinels controlled by Bastion was kind of enough in the end, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't really think it was very interesting, and I don't think it made a lot of sense, and I don't think it added gravity to the series because the real threat was just Bastion, and Bastion with an army of sentinels is equally as threatening as Bastion with an army of human sentinel hybrids.
But like, when it comes down to it, Sentinels aren't very interesting either. I always thought Sentinels were some of the most boring villains in X-Men. They're just robots. I mean, who cares if they're robots that are good at fighting mutants? At the end of the day, they're just robots. They don't have.
And that's why they weren't really in the movies, right?
Yeah, well, they were a little bit. I mean, they were a little bit in Days of the Future Past.
In the
even,
future scenes in Days
but
of Future Past, they were, but those are very
yeah,
short scenes within the movie.
right. But so yeah, I was disappointed when it got to be Sentinels being the big bad again. Because I just kind of wanted a character that I was less familiar with, some sort of other plot. The trouble is that you kind of need an infinite army kind of scenario to fight the X-Men, because if it's just one single person otherwise, then they just gang up and beat them up, you know? So I think they thought they needed to do this because of the threat level. And also the Sentinels are kind of like the big famous bads from the 90s cartoon too, because they did cover the Days of the Future Past comic art and that. I remember seeing a little bit of that anyway. So I get why they did Sentinels. I was just kind of disappointed that they did.
It's all right. They already have
But
introduced
trust me, I really
Apocalypse
enjoyed it.
again by going back to ancient Egypt. So we're getting Apocalypse in season 2, Doa. Don't you worry about it.
Yeah, I don't think they'll bring Oscar Isaac back to voice act him though. They did bring, speaking of voice actors, they did bring many, not all, but many of the original cast back, which was kind of neat. And the thing about voice acting and just singing and things like that is that you can maintain that voice for a very, very long time, whereas actors who appear on screen have trouble reprising roles because obviously you look older.
Indiana Jones.
You can, yeah, or like anything, right? You don't have to de-age someone who's a voice actor. Usually you can still do that voice. I remember, obviously Mark Hamill's a great example of this, still doing the Joker, like what, 30 years after he first did it. And the voice sounds like a more polished, more developed version of that voice, but he can still nail it, right? I saw B.B. King perform once when he was it was for his 83rd birthday tour. And the thing that stands out about me is his voice was just incredible. He was 83 and his guitar playing had definitely gone downhill. Legendary blues guitarist, if people aren't familiar somehow with who B.B. King was, but amazing musician. But so that was a little bit, downhill. Of course, he's 83, but like his voice sounded fantastic, So vocally, it made sense to bring a lot of the old cast back because they could clearly do it. I think they nailed it. The replacements they had were all fine. I thought the voice acting was really solid in this series too. I liked it. So, it was neat that it was a lot of the old voices, even though, like I said, I didn't watch a ton of the show. It was neat to know a lot of those people got to come back for this.
Yeah, and the Gambit stuff that I don't think was very well handled. I did appreciate some of the dramatic escalation. I thought the moment between Magneto and Wolverine was quite good at the end, where Wolverine, tries to stop Magneto by stabbing him, and then Magneto pulls all the metal out of his body.
Seen that somewhere before. Yeah.
Yeah.
No! Magnus! For the love of God, don't do this!
But I mean, it's always been a cool dynamic between Magneto and Wolverine. And there have always been good interactions between the characters. So, I mean, look, I think, if you like, and the thing is, both of us we like X-Men as a concept and an intellectual property. I think it's really cool, actually. So I was interested to see this. It's just been, X-Men has been, in the interpretations to TV and film, has been really inconsistent. Like, I feel like it has a very high ceiling but a very low floor, and this is squarely in the middle for me. So I was like, this is all right. I'm not nostalgia baited by this. Jubilee's super annoying. You could cut out half this show and lose almost nothing. I liked the Genosha scenes. I liked the last 3 episodes. I thought all of that was really cool and really well handled. There was just too much nonsense, too much filler. I don't give a shit about clone Jean Grey. Like, that whole storyline was just completely meaningless to me. I didn't like the Rogue Magneto Gambit love triangle. I thought that was trash. But you know what? If you're enjoying it, guys, everything goes by so quickly in this show that all of the problems you don't have to deal with for very long, because it moves too fast, and they just here it is, and it's gone.
You just kind of enjoy watching it as it happens, Like I said, it's a theme park ride, You're not going to catch all of it at one time through, but you're just going to enjoy it and enjoy the action, enjoy the funny moments, enjoy the melodrama. I feel like I have a problem being too picky about the relationship of the powers and things like that and this type of thing, because like one thing that bugged me through the whole series was Morph, because as far as I was aware, he just has the power to look like other things,
but he was
in this
getting the
show,
powers of
yeah,
things. Like
in
the
this
Hulk,
show,
I was like, holy moly,
he got all the powers and stuff too, right? He actually became that person, you know, that mutant or superhero, and I'm like, well, that kind of just breaks your whole universe, doesn't it? Doesn't that just make him like the most powerful mutant ever?
How come he just
if
didn't
he
turn
can
into
just-
Bastion at the end and then just fight Bastion?
Yeah, it's like I feel bad about Rogue. Like, you know, Rogue can like suck people's powers and things like that, but Morph can like be physically with whoever he wants because he can just turn into people. He doesn't have to like touch them and drain their souls or whatever, you know. So Rogue kind of, you know, is kind of like a worse version of Morph basically at this point, you know. So yeah, so that was like one of my biggest problems, and I'm like, well, you can't just let Morph just have everybody's powers,
Plus,
otherwise he's just the most obscenely strong mutant in the world now. Like,
plus
what are you
we
gonna
have to
do
ask questions of what happens if Morph turns into Rogue and then touches Rogue.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I don't know. Or what happens if Morph turns into Magneto and then they both resonate the same thing at each other at the same time? And then does the world just explode? Is it just a bag of holding inside another bag of holding thing? What if Morph just decides to become the Phoenix? Because that's the thing. It doesn't seem like there's any sort of like cost for this power. Like he doesn't have to do anything to achieve this. He can just do it, you know? So why doesn't he just become every bad guy they ever face and just use their powers against him, or at least stalemate them while the other X-Men beat them up or something, you know? Like I think Morph is a problem power-wise for the series going forward, because every single thing that happens, you're like, well, why can't Morph just turn into the perfect thing to answer the situation?
Yeah, why couldn't he turn into Magneto and then turn the lights back on so Professor X doesn't have to just go inside Magneto's brain and destroy his memories? I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's my point, is that like Morph is now the answer to literally every problem, and we've already got an answer to literally every problem. It's called the Phoenix power, which just pops up whenever we need Deus Ex Phoenix. And so you know, so there's already this problem of unlimited power to solve any problem already exists in the universe. So now Morph is like another one of those. So that's my biggest problem with the series, is that it's hard to take any of the plot seriously when you know Morph can just like fix it in a heartbeat if he really wanted to, you know? So it's like explaining why the Avengers can't help. Now we have to explain why Morph can't just be the perfect answer to every, you know, be the perfect solution to every problem, you know?
Yeah, indeed. Anyway, this is nostalgia bait. If you're gonna get nostalgic, you'll probably like it. It's okay. Whatever, you know, I could take it or leave it. The last 3 episodes are pretty good. A lot of it is just hilariously bad. You guys can decide whether you want to watch it or not. That's kind of where I am. It's like 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I would maybe give it like a 6 out of 10 personally, because like I said, I did enjoy it. I'm never gonna go back and watch it again. Like it's not super memorable for me, but like as like a side thing to sort of like just have on. And I didn't just have it on the side. Like I do actually sit down and focus on these and watch them when we do these things. But like, if I were to do it again, it would be on my second monitor. You know,
it's a great second monitor show. It is basically.
I would
if
look
you
over
want to
for the
watch
action scenes and ignore everything else.
If you want to watch a contemporary animated show, Invincible's just better. Invincible's just better. It's a lot better.
Yeah, and you can't even say like X-Men is the one to watch for kids, because it's not really. This isn't really made for kids either.
Nope.
So yeah, so you might as well just watch Invincible. You might as well watch, you know, like any number of
Blue Eye Samurai, if you want to watch some
Cowboy Bebop
animation for adults, right?
Yeah,
that's been released
Reign.
recently. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
Scavenger's
there's a lot of
Reign.
other options. Yeah,
which by the way, DoA, unfortunately, they have said that it is not going to be renewed for a season 2 recently. Scavenger's Reign.
Wow.
And
that's why we can't have nice things.
But that was just HBO. It is now on Netflix as well. And so
Great.
I am
Oh, yeah, I read
hopeful
about
that if it does well on Netflix, that maybe Netflix will revive season 2. So always possibilities out there. So if you guys haven't seen Scavenger's Reign, go watch that instead. It's way better. And if you watch it on Netflix, maybe Netflix will get a second season, which would actually be good. So
put it on your second monitor.
we are going to be returning to current releases. We were waiting for all of X-Men 97 to come out before we did it for this show. We are going to be doing Furiosa next, the new Mad Max movie by George Miller. It's a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road. I am very excited about this because I loved Fury Road. So we'll see how it is, but our next show will be on that. So we'll see you then.